crisp December morning in 1996, 16-year-old Samantha Kline stepped into the Rocky Mountains with her friends. It was supposed to be fun, just another weekend adventure before Christmas break. Snow-capped peaks stretched endlessly before them, the air so cold it burned their lungs with every breath. They laughed. They took photos. They felt invincible. But by nightfall, Samantha was gone. And here's what nobody tells you about disappearances in the wilderness. They don't happen slowly. There's no gradual fade to black. One moment you're there, and the next you're swallowed whole by mountains that don't care about your plans, your dreams, or the people waiting for you to come home. 2 years later, Samantha was found alive. But when she stumbled out of those woods, frostbitten, skeletal, her eyes hollow and distant, everyone knew immediately that something was very, very wrong. The girl who returned wasn't the same girl who vanished, and what happened to her during those lost years would haunt everyone who heard her story. This is that story. December 15th, 1996, started like any other Saturday for Samantha Kline. She woke up in her bedroom in Boulder, Colorado, stretched under her Spice Girls poster, and immediately texted her friends about the hike they'd planned. Her mother, Patricia, made pancakes that morning. Samantha ate 3 of them, drowned in syrup, talking excitedly about the trail they'd chosen, Eagles Peak, a moderate difficulty hike that promised stunning views of the valley below. Patricia remembers watching her daughter lace up her hiking boots by the front door. New boots, red with black laces. Samantha had saved up for months to buy them. She remembers thinking how grown-up her daughter looked, nearly 17 now, confident, full of life. "Be careful," Patricia said, like she always did. "Mom, I'm always careful," Samantha replied, rolling her eyes with that teenage certainty that nothing bad could ever happen. That was the last conversation they ever had, where Samantha was still Samantha. The group consisted of 5 teenagers: Samantha, her best friend Jessica Martinez, and 3 others from their high school, Derek, Amanda, and Tyler. They'd all done this hike before. They knew the trails. They'd checked the weather forecast that morning: clear skies, light winds, perfect conditions. What they didn't know, what nobody could have predicted, was that a freak weather system was barreling toward the Rockies at unprecedented speed. Meteorologists would later call it an anomaly. A perfect storm that formed in less than 2 hours, catching even the most experienced forecasters completely off guard. The group reached the summit just after noon. Jessica took a photo of all 5 of them, arms around each other, the vast Colorado wilderness sprawling behind them. In that photo, Samantha is smiling, truly, genuinely smiling. Her cheeks are flushed from the cold and the climb. Her dark hair escapes from beneath her knit cap. She looks happy. She looks alive. She looks like she has her whole life ahead of her. They stayed at the summit for maybe 20 minutes. Long enough to eat granola bars and take more photos. Long enough for Derek to joke about how they should do this every weekend. Long enough for none of them to notice the dark clouds gathering on the western horizon. By the time they started their descent, the temperature had dropped 15 degrees. By the time they were halfway down the mountain, the sky had turned the color of bruised steel. And then the snow started falling. Not gentle flurries. Not the pretty, postcard kind of snowfall that makes you want to stick out your tongue and catch flakes. This was aggressive, blinding, the kind of snow that erases the world in front of you within minutes. Visibility dropped from miles to mere feet. The wind picked up, howling through the trees, with a sound that Jessica would later describe as, like the mountain was screaming at us to leave. They tried to stay together. They really did. But when you can't see your hand in front of your face, when the wind is tearing at your clothes and the cold is seeping through every layer you're wearing, panic sets in fast. Tyler slipped on ice and tumbled down an embankment. Amanda went after him. Derek grabbed Jessica's hand and pulled her toward what he thought was the trail marker. And Samantha called out that she could see the path. "This way," she shouted. "I see the markers." Jessica turned to follow her best friend's voice, but in the whiteout conditions, she turned the wrong direction. By the time she realized her mistake, Samantha's voice had been swallowed by the storm. They searched. God, they searched. For 3 hours they stumbled through that blizzard, screaming Samantha's name until their voices went hoarse, until their fingers went numb, until Derek finally made the hardest decision any 16-year-old should ever have to make. "We have to get help," he said. "We're going to die up here if we don't move now." They made it down the mountain just after dark, hypothermic, terrified, traumatized. And when they told the park rangers that Samantha Kline was still up there, still lost in that storm, the looks on those rangers' faces told them everything they needed to know about Samantha's chances of survival. Nobody survives a December blizzard in the Rockies. Not overnight. Not a 16-year-old girl in hiking boots and a winter jacket. Not when the temperature drops to 10 below zero and the wind chill makes it feel like 30 below. Nobody survives that. But Patricia Kline, Samantha's mother, didn't believe in nobody. The search began at first light on December 16th. Dozens of volunteers, search and rescue teams, helicopters when the weather permitted, trained dogs following whatever scent trails they could find in the snow. Patricia was there every single day. Every single day. She stood at the base of Eagle's Peak with thermoses of coffee for the searchers, with photos of Samantha that she'd laminated to protect from the elements, with a hope so fierce and unshakable that it almost felt like denial. "She's strong," Patricia told anyone who would listen. "My daughter is so strong, she's up there waiting for us. I know she is." But as December bled into January, as the snow kept falling and the temperatures kept dropping, even the most optimistic searchers began to lose hope. They found nothing. No tracks, no clothing. No sign that Samantha had even been on that mountain. It was as if she'd simply evaporated into the storm. On January 14th, exactly 1 month after Samantha's disappearance, the official search was called off. They told Patricia that they'd done everything they could, that the conditions were simply too dangerous. That winter in the Rockies is unforgiving. And after a month, well, there was no gentle way to say it. They didn't expect to find Samantha alive. They'd be looking for remains now. And that search would have to wait until spring when the snow melted. Patricia collapsed when they told her. Just collapsed right there in the ranger station, her legs giving out beneath her, the coffee thermos she'd been holding crashing to the floor and spraying everywhere. She sobbed. Deep, guttural sobs that seemed to come from somewhere so deep inside her that it hurt everyone in that room to hear it. "I can't stop looking," she whispered. "I can't. She's my baby. She's my baby girl." But the search was over. Jessica Martinez stopped going to school. The guilt consumed her. "I should have held her hand," she told her therapist over and over again. "I should have grabbed her hand and never let go. It's my fault. It's my fault she's gone." Derek had nightmares every night. In his dreams, he could hear Samantha calling for help, and no matter how fast he ran toward her voice, he could never reach her. He'd wake up screaming. Amanda stopped hiking, stopped going outside at all if she could help it. The sight of snow made her physically ill. Tyler transferred schools, couldn't bear to walk those hallways where Samantha's locker remained exactly as she'd left it, covered in stickers and inside jokes that nobody would ever understand again. And Patricia. Patricia became a ghost in her own life. She went through the motions of living, got up, went to work at the library, came home. But anyone who knew her could see that she'd left part of herself on that mountain with her daughter. The light had gone out of her eyes. The local news covered the story for weeks. Teenager lost in freak blizzard. Search called off for missing Boulder girl. Community mourns Samantha Kline. They ran the same photo over and over, that summit photo. Samantha smiling with her friends, so full of life. But eventually, as these things always do, the story faded. Other news took over. Life moved on for everyone except the people who loved Samantha. For them, time had stopped on December 15th. At whatever moment, Samantha's voice had been swallowed by the storm. By summer, most people had accepted that Samantha was gone. When they talked about her, if they talked about her at all, it was in past tense. She was such a sweet girl. She was so full of energy. It's such a tragedy what happened to her. But Patricia never used past tense. Never. "My daughter is strong," she'd say to anyone who would listen. "She's a fighter. I know she's out there somewhere." People started avoiding her. It was too painful to watch. Too uncomfortable to witness a mother who refused to accept what everyone else had already grieved and moved past. They whispered about her at the grocery store. "Poor Patricia. She just can't let go." But here's what nobody understood. Here's what nobody could understand, unless they'd lost a child and never found the body. Without remains, without proof, without that terrible but necessary closure, hope doesn't die. It transforms into something else. Something desperate and clawing and impossible to shake. Patricia kept a bag packed by her door. Winter clothes, first aid supplies, thermal blankets, just in case. Just in case the phone rang, and someone said they'd found her daughter. She needed to be ready. The phone rang hundreds of times that year. Friends calling to check in. Family members trying to convince her to see a grief counselor. Reporters wanting to do follow-up stories on slow news days. But never the call she was waiting for. Never the one that mattered. 1997 crawled by like something wounded. Patricia marked every milestone on the calendar. January 15th, 1 month. February 15th, 2 months. March, April, May. The snow melted on Eagles Peak, and search teams went back up looking for remains. They found nothing. Not a shred of clothing, not a single item from Samantha's backpack. Nothing. It was as if the mountain had swallowed her whole. Jessica graduated high school without her best friend. At the ceremony, they left an empty chair with Samantha's name on it. Jessica couldn't look at it, couldn't bear to see that physical representation of absence. She got her diploma, walked off that stage, and vomited in the parking lot. Summer came. The first anniversary approached. December 15th, 1997. 1 full year since Samantha disappeared. The local news did a "Where Are They Now" piece, interviewing the other kids from the hike, talking about how they'd coped, how they'd moved on. "But have you really moved on?" the reporter asked Jessica. Jessica looked directly into the camera with eyes that were 20 years older than they should have been and said, "You don't move on from something like this, you just carry it. Forever." Patricia held a vigil on the anniversary. Just her and maybe a dozen other people who still cared enough to show up. They lit candles at the base of Eagles Peak. They shared memories of Samantha. They cried together in the December cold. And then something strange started happening. Reports began filtering in. Hikers on Eagles Peak claimed they'd seen someone, a figure in the distance, moving through the trees. Always too far away to identify clearly. Always vanishing before anyone could get close. The first report came in February of 1998. A couple hiking the same trail where Samantha had disappeared said they'd seen a young woman in the woods. She was far off the trail, moving strangely, stumbling more than walking. They called out to her. She didn't respond. By the time they'd made their way through the snow to where they'd seen her, she was gone. Park rangers investigated. Found no tracks, no evidence anyone had been there. They filed it away as a case of hopeful imagination. People wanted to believe Samantha was still out there, so they were seeing things that weren't real. But then, it happened again. And again. Over the next few months, 6 different hikers reported seeing the same thing. A young woman. Dark hair. Thin. Dangerously thin. Moving through the wilderness like she was lost. Some people said it was Samantha's ghost. That she died up there and her spirit couldn't find its way home. Local paranormal groups started doing investigations on the mountain. It became a thing, a dark tourism attraction that made Patricia physically ill. "My daughter is not a ghost story," she said in a shaky voice to a reporter who asked her about the sightings. "She's not entertainment. She's real. She's my child. And if she's up there, if there's any chance she's still alive, then somebody needs to find her." But nobody took it seriously. How could they? How could anyone believe that a teenage girl had survived not just one December night in the Rockies, but an entire year and then some? It was impossible. It defied every rule of survival, every understanding of human endurance. The human body can't survive extended exposure to sub-zero temperatures. It can't function without regular food and water. It can't maintain itself in total isolation without proper shelter. The idea that Samantha could have survived even a week was laughable. 2 years was impossible. Except on December 15th, 1998, at approximately 4:30 in the afternoon, a park ranger named Michael Torres was doing a routine patrol of Eagles Peak when he saw something that made him radio for immediate backup. A young woman had just stumbled out of the tree line. She was barefoot in the snow. Her clothes hung off her skeletal frame in tatters. Her hair was matted and fell past her shoulders, unwashed and tangled with twigs and leaves. Her face was gaunt, cheekbones jutting out sharply, lips cracked and bleeding. But it was her eyes that stopped Michael cold. They were empty, completely, utterly empty. Like looking into the windows of an abandoned house where nobody had lived for years. "Miss?" Michael called out, his voice shaking. "Miss, do you need help?" She turned toward his voice slowly. So slowly. like her body had forgotten how to respond to stimuli, like the simple act of turning her head required conscious thought. And then she collapsed. Michael ran to her, calling into his radio, shouting for medical assistance, for backup, for someone to help him because this couldn't be happening, this couldn't be real. He knelt beside her in the snow. Her pulse was there but weak, her breathing shallow. Her skin was ice cold, but, and this was the thing that Michael would never forget, the detail that would wake him up at night for years afterward, she had frostbite scars. Old scars. Healed over scars on her feet and hands, which meant she'd survived frostbite. Had survived it long enough for her body to heal. Which meant she'd been out there for. "Can you hear me?" Michael asked. "Can you tell me your name?" The woman's eyes fluttered open. Those empty, haunted eyes. She tried to speak, but no sound came out at first. Her lips moved. She tried again. And then, in a voice so hoarse it barely sounded human, she whispered two words that made Michael's blood run cold. "Find home." Samantha Kline, because it was Samantha, confirmed later through dental records and DNA testing, was airlifted to Boulder Community Hospital. The medical team that received her had never seen anything like it. She weighed 87 pounds, a girl who should have weighed around 120. She was severely malnourished, dehydrated despite the snow she'd presumably been eating, covered in scars from frostbite and exposure, with muscle atrophy so severe she could barely move. But she was alive. Against every possible odd, against every law of nature and survival, Samantha Kline had survived 2 years in the Rocky Mountain wilderness. Patricia got the call at 6:15 that evening. She was making dinner, canned soup. She'd been making the same canned soup for 2 years because cooking anything else reminded her too much of those pancakes she'd made on Samantha's last morning. "Mrs. Kline?" the voice on the phone said. "This is Boulder Community Hospital. You need to come down here right away. It's about your daughter." Patricia dropped the phone. She didn't remember driving to the hospital, didn't remember parking or running through the emergency room doors or demanding to know where her daughter was. Her memory of those moments is just blank. Like her brain couldn't process what was happening, so it simply shut down everything except the most basic motor functions necessary to get her to Samantha. They took her to a private room. A doctor Patricia never remembered his name tried to prepare her for what she was about to see. "Mrs. Kline, she's been through significant trauma. She doesn't look like you remember. And there are complications. She's not responding normally. We need you to be prepared for." But Patricia wasn't listening. She pushed past him and opened the door to her daughter's room. And there, in a hospital bed, connected to IVs and monitors, covered in blankets but still shivering, was Samantha. Patricia made a sound that wasn't quite a scream and wasn't quite a sob. Something in between. Something that came from the deepest part of her soul, where she'd been storing 2 years' worth of grief and hope and desperation. "Samantha," she whispered. Then louder. "Samantha, baby, it's Mom. It's Mom, sweetheart. You're safe now. You're safe." She rushed to the bedside, grabbed her daughter's hand. It was ice cold and so thin, all bones and tendons, no muscle left at all. "Samantha, can you hear me? Baby, it's Mom. I'm here. I never stopped looking for you. I never gave up. I knew you were out there. I knew it." And Samantha slowly, so slowly, turned her head toward her mother's voice. But there was no recognition in her eyes. No spark of "Mom, I'm home." No tears of relief. No emotional reunion that you'd expect after 2 years of being lost and alone and terrified. Just emptiness. Patricia's heart shattered all over again. She'd gotten her daughter back from the dead, but the girl looking at her with those hollow eyes wasn't the girl she'd lost. This was someone else. Something else. A shell where Samantha used to live. "Baby?" Patricia whispered. "Don't you know me? It's Mom. It's your Mom." Samantha blinked. Slow. Mechanical. Like her body was going through the motions of being human but didn't quite remember how. And then, in that same hoarse, broken voice she'd used with the park ranger, Samantha spoke. "Who is Mom?" The doctors called it dissociative amnesia, a psychological response to extreme trauma where the brain essentially shuts down memory formation and recall to protect itself from overwhelming experiences. They said it wasn't uncommon in cases of severe trauma. They said with time and therapy, Samantha's memories might return. They said a lot of things that were supposed to be comforting but just felt like more ways of saying, "Your daughter is broken, and we don't know how to fix her." Samantha didn't remember her name. Didn't remember her family, her friends, her home, her life before the mountain. When they showed her photos of herself, that summit photo with her friends, pictures from her childhood, her senior portrait that had been taken just weeks before she disappeared, she looked at them with polite confusion like she was looking at a stranger. "This is me?" she asked, pointing at her own face in the photos. "Yes, sweetheart," Patricia said, trying to keep her voice steady even though she was dying inside. "That's you. That's my beautiful daughter." Samantha studied the photo, touched her own face, then touched the face in the photo, trying to make the connection. Trying to understand how the smiling, healthy girl in the picture could possibly be the same person as the skeletal stranger in the hospital bed. "I don't remember," she finally said, flat, emotionless. "I don't remember any of it." Jessica came to visit. Couldn't wait to see her best friend. She'd been crying with joy since she heard the news. Samantha was alive. Samantha was home. Everything was going to be okay now. But when Jessica walked into that hospital room, the words died in her throat. The person in the bed looked like Samantha. Technically. Same bone structure under the gauntness. Same dark hair, though longer and wilder now. But everything else, the spark, the energy, the essence of what made Samantha Samantha, was gone. "Sam?" Jessica whispered. "Oh my God, Sam. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I let go of your hand. I should have held on. I should have—" "Who are you?" Samantha asked. Jessica froze. "What? Sam, it's me. It's Jess. Your best friend. We've been best friends since 3rd grade. Don't you remember me?" Samantha shook her head slowly. "I'm sorry. I don't remember anything." Jessica broke down, sobbed, apologized over and over again, even though Samantha just stared at her with those empty eyes, clearly not understanding why this stranger was so upset. The doctors ran every test imaginable. MRIs, CT scans, blood work, psychological evaluations. Physically, aside from the malnutrition and exposure damage, Samantha was remarkably healthy. Her brain showed no signs of injury, no tumors, no lesions, nothing that would explain the complete memory loss. But psychologically, that was a different story. Samantha displayed behaviors that concerned everyone. She didn't understand basic social cues, didn't know how to respond to emotions. When people cried around her, she watched them with curious detachment, like she was observing an interesting scientific phenomenon rather than human suffering. She flinched at loud noises, became agitated in crowded spaces, refused to sleep at night, insisting she needed to stay awake and watch for danger. When nurses tried to close the blinds in her room, she had a full panic attack, hyperventilating, screaming, clawing at the windows like a trapped animal. They had to keep the blinds open, had to let her see outside at all times. It was the only thing that calmed her. And she had this habit, this disturbing habit that made everyone uncomfortable. She would sit perfectly still for hours, barely blinking, barely breathing, just existing, conserving energy. One of the psychologists said it looked like hibernation behavior, like her body had adapted to long periods of stillness to survive the cold and lack of food. But humans don't hibernate. Humans aren't built for that kind of stasis. So what exactly had happened to Samantha Kline during those 2 years on the mountain? The physical evidence told part of the story. The scars on her feet and hands showed repeated exposure to frostbite, meaning she'd suffered and recovered from it multiple times. She had calluses on her knees and elbows that suggested she'd been crawling more than walking. Her teeth showed signs of chewing on bark and other non-food items. She'd been surviving. Barely. On the absolute edge of what a human body could endure. But surviving where? How? The search teams had combed those mountains for months. Where had she been hiding that no one could find her? Patricia tried to ask her, gently, carefully. "Samantha, honey, can you tell me where you were? Where were you living all this time?" Samantha tilted her head. That slow, mechanical movement that was becoming more and more disturbing the more Patricia saw it. "The dark place," Samantha said. "What dark place, sweetheart?" "The dark place where the mountain breathes." Patricia felt ice run down her spine. "What does that mean? I don't understand." But Samantha had already gone back to staring out the window, and no amount of gentle questioning could get her to elaborate. The doctor said she was speaking in metaphors, that her traumatized brain was trying to process experiences it couldn't fully remember, so it was creating abstract language to describe them. But Patricia couldn't shake the feeling that Samantha meant something very literal, very specific. Something had happened to her daughter on that mountain, something beyond just surviving the elements, something that had fundamentally changed who Samantha was as a person. And whatever it was, whatever that dark place where the mountain breathes, meant it was still living inside her daughter's broken mind, waiting. They released Samantha from the hospital 3 weeks later. She'd gained back some weight, though she was still dangerously underweight. Her physical wounds were healing. But psychologically, if anything, she was getting worse. She'd started having nightmares, violent, screaming nightmares that woke up half the hospital. She'd thrash in her bed, fighting invisible attackers, shouting words that didn't make sense. "Stay back," she'd scream. "I fed you already. Leave me alone." Fed who? The nurses would ask the next morning. Samantha never remembered the nightmares, would wake up confused about why her throat was sore and her sheets were soaked with sweat. Patricia brought her home on January 5, 1999, 3 weeks after she'd been found, 2 years and 3 weeks after she'd disappeared. Walking into her childhood bedroom, Samantha showed no recognition, looked at the Spice Girls poster, the photos on the walls, the stuffed animals on the bed, like they belonged to someone else. Which, in a way, they did. The girl who'd loved those things was gone. This new Samantha was someone different entirely. "You can change anything you want," Patricia told her. "This is your room, your space. Make it comfortable." Samantha nodded, but didn't move to change anything. Just sat on the edge of the bed, her own bed, like a guest in someone else's house. Patricia tried so hard to make things normal. She cooked Samantha's favorite meals, but Samantha picked at the food, clearly uncomfortable with the portion sizes. She was used to eating almost nothing. A full plate seemed to overwhelm her. She tried to reintroduce Samantha to her old friends, but Samantha couldn't connect with any of them. Didn't understand their inside jokes, their shared memories, their attempts to reminisce about the good old days. To Samantha, there were no old days. There was only the mountain. Jessica kept trying. God bless her, she really did try. She'd come over every few days, bringing movies they used to watch together, music they used to love, trying desperately to find something, anything that would spark recognition in her best friend's eyes. But nothing worked. One afternoon in late January, Jessica brought over their old journals. They'd kept matching journals in middle school, writing entries back and forth to each other. Shared secrets, shared dreams, shared everything. "Look," Jessica said, flipping through the pages. "See? This is your handwriting. This is you writing about your crush on Tyler Morrison in 8th grade. Remember? You wrote me like 5 pages about his smile." Samantha looked at the handwriting. Her handwriting. Read the words she'd written years ago. "This person seems happy," Samantha said quietly. "That person is you, Sam." "No," Samantha shook her head. "That person is someone else. Someone who doesn't exist anymore." Jessica started crying. Again. She cried every time she visited now. "Don't say that. You're still you. You're still in there somewhere." But Samantha just stared at her with those empty eyes and said, "I don't think I am." The incident that changed everything happened on February 7th, 1999. Patricia woke up at 3 in the morning to strange sounds coming from downstairs. Scratching, shuffling. She grabbed the baseball bat she'd been keeping by her bed, old habits from 2 years of sleeping alone, terrified, and crept downstairs. Samantha was in the kitchen. She'd pushed all the furniture against the walls, clearing a large space in the center of the floor, and she was building something, using couch, cushions, blankets, chairs, creating some kind of structure. "Samantha?" Patricia whispered. "Baby, what are you doing?" Samantha didn't even look up, kept working with intense focus. "Need shelter. Storm coming. Need to protect the space." "Honey, there's no storm. We're inside. We're safe." "No." Samantha's voice was urgent now. "Afraid. Not safe. Never safe. Always need shelter. Always need to be ready." Patricia's heart broke. She understood then. Samantha's brain was still on that mountain, still in survival mode, still preparing for the next disaster even though she was home and warm and safe. "Okay," Patricia said softly. "Okay, sweetheart. You build your shelter. It's okay." Samantha worked for another hour, creating a small, cave-like structure in the middle of the kitchen. When she was done, she crawled inside and curled into a ball, and finally fell asleep. Patricia called the psychologist in the morning. Dr. Sarah Chen had been working with Samantha since she'd been found, trying to unlock the memories trapped behind walls of trauma. It's called regression, Dr. Chen explained. Her mind is trying to process the survival behaviors she developed on the mountain. The shelter building, the hypervigilance, the need to constantly prepare for danger, these are all adaptive responses that kept her alive. But now that she's safe, her brain doesn't know how to turn those responses off. How do I help her? Patricia asked desperately. Time, patience, therapy. And, honestly, Mrs. Kline, we need to consider the possibility that we may never fully understand what Samantha experienced up there. The human mind can only take so much before it starts protecting itself through forgetting. Maybe, and I know this is hard to hear, maybe it's better if she doesn't remember. But Patricia wasn't sure that was true, because the not remembering wasn't protecting Samantha, it was destroying her. She was trapped between two worlds, the girl she'd been before the mountain and the person she'd become on it, and she belonged to neither. Spring came. The snow melted. Flowers bloomed. The world came alive again with color and warmth and beauty. Samantha noticed none of it. She spent most of her days sitting by the window in her room, staring out at the mountains in the distance. Just staring. For hours. Sometimes she'd whisper things that Patricia couldn't quite hear. Conversations with someone who wasn't there. Dr. Chen said it was normal for trauma survivors to engage in self-soothing behaviors. The whispering was probably Samantha talking to herself, working through her confusion and fear. But Patricia wasn't so sure. The way Samantha whispered it didn't sound like she was talking to herself. It sounded like she was talking to someone else, someone specific. And sometimes she'd pause like she was listening to a response. Patricia tried not to think about it, tried not to let her imagination run wild with possibilities too horrible to consider. Her daughter was traumatized. That was all. Traumatized and broken and struggling to heal. There was nothing supernatural about it, nothing sinister. But then, the dreams got worse. Samantha started sleepwalking. Patricia would wake up to find her daughter standing in her doorway, eyes open but seeing nothing, whispering that same phrase over and over. The dark place where the mountain breathes. The dark place where the mountain breathes. Patricia would gently guide her back to bed, and in the morning, Samantha wouldn't remember any of it. The scratches appeared in late March. Long, angry scratches down Samantha's arms, like she'd been clawed by something with sharp nails. Samantha, what happened to your arms? Patricia asked, trying to keep the panic out of her voice. Samantha looked down at the scratches, like she was seeing them for the first time. I don't know. I don't remember. Did you do this to yourself? I don't think so. But she didn't sound certain. They had to take her back to the hospital. The scratches were deep enough to need attention. When the doctor asked how she'd gotten them, Samantha said something that made everyone in the room go quiet. They're angry I left, she said, calm, matter of fact. They don't like being alone. Who's angry? The doctor asked. Who doesn't like being alone? But Samantha had retreated back into herself, wouldn't answer any more questions. Dr. Chen increased the therapy sessions to twice a week. They tried different approaches, cognitive behavioral therapy, EMDR for trauma, art therapy, even hypnosis to try to access the locked memories. Nothing worked. Samantha remained a mystery, a girl-shaped puzzle with pieces that didn't fit together anymore. Jessica stopped visiting in April. She couldn't take it anymore. Couldn't keep looking at her best friend and seeing a stranger. Couldn't keep crying every time she left. It was too painful. She wrote Samantha a letter explaining that she needed space to heal, that she'd always love her, that she hoped someday they could be friends again. Samantha read the letter with no visible emotion, set it down, never mentioned it again. Patricia was losing hope. Not hope that Samantha would survive, she was surviving just fine physically, but hope that her daughter would ever truly come back. That the girl she'd raised, the girl who'd loved pancakes and hiking and the Spice Girls, would ever exist again in any meaningful way. And then in late spring, Samantha started talking. Not the short, mechanical responses she usually gave. Real talking. Full sentences. Descriptions. It started when they were eating dinner. Samantha was pushing food around her plate, lost in thought, when suddenly she said, "There was a cave." Patricia almost dropped her fork. What? A cave. That's where I stayed. Deep in the mountain. It was dark all the time, So dark I couldn't see my hands in front of my face. But it was warm. Warmer than outside. That's why I survived. Patricia's heart raced. This was the most Samantha had spoken about her experience since she'd been found. Where was this cave? Can you remember where it was? Samantha shook her head. I don't know. I stumbled into it during the storm. I was so cold, dying. And then there was the opening, just a crack in the rocks. I squeezed through, and inside it opened up. Big space, dark space. What did you do in there for 2 years? How did you eat? Samantha's expression changed. Something dark flickered across her face. There were things in the cave, things to eat. I learned what was safe, what wasn't. The mountain provided. What kind of things? But Samantha had stopped talking again, retreated back into silence. Dr. Chen was excited by this development. She's starting to process. The memories are coming back in fragments. This is good. This is progress. But Patricia wasn't sure it was good, because the more Samantha remembered, the more disturbed she became. The scratches got worse, the nightmares more violent. She'd wake up screaming about things with too many eyes, about darkness that moved, about something that lived deep in the mountain and didn't want her to leave. It's metaphor, Dr. Chen kept saying. Her brain is creating these images to process the trauma of isolation and near-death experiences. But Patricia was starting to wonder if it was metaphor at all. One night in June, Patricia woke up to find Samantha's bed empty. She searched the house in a panic, finally finding her daughter in the backyard, on her hands and knees, digging in the dirt with her bare hands. Samantha, what are you doing? Samantha looked up. Her hands were bleeding from digging in the rocky soil. Her eyes were wild, unfocused. I need to go back, she said. I need to go back to the mountain. I promised. I promised I'd come back. Promised who, baby? The dark. I promised the dark. Patricia pulled her daughter inside, cleaned her hands, held her while she sobbed real, human sobs for the first time since she'd been found. I can't explain it, Samantha whispered between sobs. But, Mom, I left something up there, something important, and it won't let me forget. It keeps calling me back. Summer turned to fall. The leaves changed colors. The air got crisp, and Samantha's mental state continued to deteriorate. She stopped eating again, lost the weight she'd gained. When Patricia tried to encourage her to eat, Samantha would say, I don't deserve food. I broke my promise. The obsession with the mountain grew. She'd spend hours staring at maps of Eagle's Peak, tracing routes with her finger, whispering coordinates that made no sense, planning a return that Patricia was absolutely not going to allow. You're not going back up there, Patricia said firmly. That mountain almost killed you. I'm not losing you again. You don't understand, Samantha replied. Her voice had changed, deeper, older somehow. I'm already lost. I've been lost since I left. The only place I make sense is up there, in the dark, in the place where I learned who I really am. Dr. Chen recommended inpatient treatment, a psychiatric facility where Samantha could get intensive 24-hour care. Patricia resisted at first, but when she found Samantha standing on a chair in the garage at 2 a.m, studying the climbing gear that had been stored there since before the accident, she knew she had no choice. Samantha was admitted to Clear Creek Behavioral Health on September 20th, 1999. She'd been home for less than 9 months. The facility was nice, as far as psychiatric hospitals go. Private rooms, peaceful grounds, staff trained in trauma recovery. But Samantha hated it. She hated being unable to see the mountains, hated the locked doors and the scheduled meals and the group therapy sessions where other patients shared their traumas and expected her to do the same. I can't explain it to them, Samantha told Patricia during a visit. They wouldn't understand. They've never been to the dark place. They don't know what lives in the mountain. Samantha, nothing lives in the mountain. It was just a cave, just rocks and darkness and your own fear. Samantha looked at her mother with those empty eyes that had once been so full of life and laughter. You're wrong. Something lives there. And it saved me. And I abandoned it. And it won't forgive me for that. The staff at Clear Creek tried everything. Medication to help with the nightmares and anxiety. Different therapy modalities. Even exposure therapy where they'd show her pictures of mountains and caves, trying to desensitize her to the trauma. Nothing worked. If anything, Being separated from the mountains made Samantha worse. She became agitated, aggressive, had to be restrained twice when she tried to break windows, screaming that she needed to see the peaks, needed to know the mountain was still there. In October, she stopped speaking altogether, just went completely nonverbal. Would sit in her room, staring at the wall, occasionally scratching symbols into her arms with her fingernails. Symbols that looked like some kind of primitive writing, symbols that no one could interpret. Dr. Chen consulted with colleagues. They'd never seen a case quite like this. The closest comparison was to prisoners of war who'd been held in isolation for extended periods, or cult survivors who'd been psychologically manipulated. But even those cases didn't quite match what was happening to Samantha. Patricia visited every day, would sit with her silent daughter, holding her scarred hand, talking to her about everything and nothing. Your cousin is getting married in the spring. She'd love for you to be there. Jessica started college. She's studying psychology. Can you believe that? She wants to help people who've been through what you've been through. Samantha never responded, never even acknowledged that she could hear. And then, November 15th, 10 days before the third anniversary of her disappearance, something shifted. Samantha spoke. Just one sentence, but it changed everything. She looked directly at her mother and said, in a voice that didn't sound quite like her own, "I need to tell you what really happened." They moved to a private room. Just Patricia, Samantha, Dr. Chen, and a tape recorder to document whatever Samantha was about to reveal. Patricia's hands were shaking. 3 years of questions. 3 years of nightmares and wondering and never understanding. Finally, she was going to get answers. Samantha sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap. When she spoke, her voice was steady, calm, like she was reciting a story that had happened to someone else. "When I got lost in the storm," she began, "I wasn't alone." Patricia's breath caught. "What do you mean?" Jessica said, "Not my friends, something else. I could feel it watching me, following me through the snow. I thought it was my imagination, fear playing tricks, but then I fell. Tumbled down a ravine and into the opening. The cave you mentioned before." Samantha nodded. It wasn't just a cave. It was wrong. The geometry was wrong. The way sound echoed was wrong. It was like the space inside was bigger than it should have been, based on the opening. Does that make sense? It didn't. But Patricia nodded anyway, afraid that if she questioned anything, Samantha would stop talking. "I was hurt from the fall. My ankle was twisted, maybe broken. I couldn't walk, couldn't go anywhere, so I just waited, hoped someone would find me. I could hear the storm outside, the wind howling. I knew I should be freezing to death, should already be dead. But it was warm in there. Not comfortable warm, wrong warm. Like body heat, like something alive was keeping the cave warm." Dr. Chen leaned forward. "Did you see anything? Any animals? Other hikers?" "No, not at first. For the first few days, I was alone. I had some granola bars in my pack, a water bottle. I rationed them, tried to make them last. But on the third day, maybe the fourth, I lost track of time in the dark. I heard something." "What did you hear?" Samantha's expression didn't change, but Patricia saw her daughter's hands clench. Breathing. Something was breathing in the cave with me. Deep, slow breaths. Not human breaths. Too slow, too deep, like the mountain itself was breathing. That's when I knew I wasn't alone. I'd never been alone. Patricia felt ice run down her spine. This couldn't be real. This had to be trauma-induced delusion. But the way Samantha was talking, so calm, so certain, made it hard to dismiss. "What happened next?" Dr. Chen asked gently. "It talked to me." The room went silent. "Not with words," Samantha clarified. "Not with sound. It was like thoughts being placed directly in my head, telling me things, showing me things. It said it had been alone for so long, trapped in the mountain, forgotten. It was so hungry, so lonely." "Samantha," Patricia whispered, "that's not possible. You were hallucinating from the cold and fear and—" "I know how it sounds." Samantha finally looked at her mother, really looked at her. "I know it sounds insane, but Mom, I was there. I felt it. This thing, whatever it was, it kept me alive. It brought me food. Little things at first. Insects. Then larger things. Animals that had wandered into the cave and died there. It told me I had to eat. Had to survive. Because it had been alone for so long, and now it finally had company. Dr. Chen was writing notes frantically. This entity, did it have a form? Could you see it? No. It was the darkness. It was made of darkness. Sometimes I'd feel it move around me, feel the air shift, feel something that might have been hands touching my face. But I never saw it. Never saw anything except black. How long were you in the cave? Patricia asked, though part of her didn't want to know. All of it. Both years. I never left the cave until the day the ranger found me. But that's Samantha. You couldn't have survived 2 years in a cave with no sunlight, no proper food, no... It kept me alive. Samantha's voice was firm. I should have died 1,000 times, should have starved or frozen or lost my mind completely, but it wouldn't let me die. It needed me too much. It would bring me water somehow. I never knew where it came from. Food things I tried not to think too hard about eating. It kept me warm, kept me breathing, kept me existing because the alternative was being alone again. And it couldn't bear that. Why did you leave? Dr. Chen asked. If this entity kept you alive for 2 years, why did you finally leave? Samantha's calm facade cracked. Just a little. Just enough for Patricia to see the terror underneath. Because I realized what it wanted, Samantha whispered. It didn't just want company. It wanted me. All of me. It was slowly absorbing me. Taking pieces of my memory, my personality, myself. Feeding on who I was. I was disappearing. Becoming part of it. And if I'd stayed any longer, I wouldn't have been Samantha anymore. I would have just been another piece of the darkness. Another voice it had consumed. So you ran? I fought my way out. It tried to stop me. Grabbed at me. Tore at me. That's where these scars came from. She held up her arms, showing the deep scratches that had never fully healed. It screamed at me. Not with sound, with feeling. Pure rage and betrayal and loneliness so deep it felt like drowning. It begged me to stay. Promised me things. Promised it would take better care of me. Promised I'd never feel pain again if I just came back. But you kept going, Patricia said, tears streaming down her face. I kept going. I promised myself I'd never go back. That I'd rather die in the snow than spend one more second in that cave. And when I finally broke free, when I finally saw daylight for the first time in 2 years, it was like being born again. Except I couldn't remember how to be human anymore. I'd forgotten. It had taken too much. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Dr. Chen asked the question Patricia was too afraid to voice. Samantha, do you still feel connected to this entity? Samantha's eyes went distant. Every second of every day, it calls to me. In my dreams, in the quiet moments. I can feel it in the mountain. Waiting, angry that I left, lonely again. And part of me, the part it changed, wants to go back. Wants to return to the dark where things made sense in a way they never will out here. But you won't go back, Patricia said firmly. Right? You'll stay here. Stay safe. Stay with me. Samantha looked at her mother with infinite sadness. I don't know, Mom. I really don't know. Because the thing about living in the dark for that long, you forget what light feels like. And now that I'm back in the world, it all just feels too bright, too loud, too wrong. The darkness is calling me home, and I'm afraid that one day I won't be strong enough to resist. The recording of Samantha's confession was listened to by dozens of professionals, psychiatrists, trauma specialists, even a few anthropologists who specialized in isolation experiences and sensory deprivation. The consensus was clear. Samantha had created an elaborate dissociative fantasy to cope with the trauma of her survival experience. The entity was her own mind, protecting her from the horror of being alone and dying. The feeling of being absorbed was her sense of self-fragmenting under extreme stress. The calls to return were intrusive thoughts common in PTSD sufferers. It was all explainable, all treatable with the right combination of therapy and medication and time. Except it didn't explain everything. It didn't explain how Samantha had actually survived. Search teams had combed those mountains. They'd explored every known cave system. They'd mapped the area extensively after Samantha's disappearance. There was no cave that matched her description, no space where someone could have survived for 2 years without being found. It didn't explain the symbols Samantha had been scratching into her arms. Patricia had them photographed and shown to linguistics experts. They weren't any known language, but they had structure, grammar, syntax. They were a writing system, but not one that existed anywhere in recorded human history. And it didn't explain what happened on December 15th, 1999, the third anniversary of Samantha's disappearance. Patricia had planned to spend the day at Clear Creek with her daughter, a quiet observance of how far they'd come, how much Samantha had survived. But when she arrived at the facility that morning, Samantha's room was empty. The window was open. The screen had been torn out from the inside. Samantha was gone. They found her 3 days later, on Eagle's Peak, standing at the entrance to a cave that wasn't on any map. A cave that the search and rescue team swore hadn't been there during any of their previous searches. Samantha was standing perfectly still, staring into the darkness. She didn't resist when they tried to bring her down, didn't fight, just kept looking back over her shoulder at the cave entrance as they led her away. "It's waiting," she told Patricia when she was returned to Clear Creek with increased security measures. "It's always waiting. And one day I'm going to stop fighting." And now we reach the hardest part of Samantha's story. The part where there are no easy answers, no satisfying conclusions. Because here's the truth. Samantha Kline never fully recovered. Never became the girl she was before the mountain. That girl was gone, consumed by the darkness, or by trauma, or by the impossible experience of surviving something no one should have survived. She lived at Clear Creek for another year, made some progress, learned to manage the intrusive thoughts and the nightmares, learned to exist in the world even though it never felt quite right. On her 20th birthday, she was released back to Patricia's care. She got a part-time job at a bookstore, started taking college classes online, tried to build something resembling a normal life. But she never stopped thinking about the mountain, never stopped feeling the pull. Patricia would wake up some mornings to find Samantha standing at the window, staring at the distant peaks. "It's calling," Samantha would say. "Can you hear it calling?" Patricia couldn't hear anything, but she believed her daughter could. Jessica reached out a few times over the years. They'd meet for coffee occasionally. Awkward meetings where Jessica tried too hard to recapture their old friendship, and Samantha politely participated without really connecting. They were strangers who happened to share a past that only one of them could remember. Dr. Chen continued seeing Samantha for therapy. They made recordings of their sessions, hours and hours of Samantha describing her experience in the cave, the entity, the darkness that had kept her alive and changed her forever. Some of those recordings were shared with researchers studying extreme survival situations. Samantha's case became famous in certain academic circles. There were papers written, theories proposed, conferences held, but no one could definitively explain what had happened to her. The cave on Eagle's Peak, the one they'd found her standing at, was explored by several teams. It went back about 40 feet and then dead-ended at a solid rock wall. There was no massive chamber, no warm space where someone could survive for years. Just a shallow cave that maybe could have sheltered someone for a night or two. But Samantha insisted it was the same cave. "They sealed it," she'd say. "After I left. They didn't want anyone else finding it." Finding them. Who was they? Geologists explained that caves don't just seal themselves. Patricia wanted to believe the experts, wanted to believe in rational explanations. But she'd seen her daughter's scars, had listened to her describe things no one could have imagined without experiencing them, had watched Samantha navigate the world like someone who was only half present, with the other half still trapped in the darkness. And she'd seen the photos, the ones taken by researchers who'd explored the cave after finding Samantha there. Photos that showed, in the deepest part of the cave before it dead-ended, scratches on the walls. Thousands of scratches, made with fingernails, made over what must have been years. Scratches that spelled out words in that same unknown language Samantha had been writing on her arms. Scratches that, when Samantha saw the photos, made her cry for the first time since she'd been found. "I told you," she whispered. "I told you it was real." It's been 25 years now since Samantha Kline walked into those mountains and disappeared into a snowstorm. 23 years since she was found alive against all possible odds. She's 41 years old today. She still lives in Boulder, not far from her mother. She works at that same bookstore, has a small apartment with windows that face the mountains. She never married, never had children, never really built the life that 16-year-old Samantha had dreamed about during that last breakfast with her mother. But she's alive. And some days, that feels like victory. Other days, it feels like the cruelest punishment imaginable, surviving something you were never meant to survive. and having to live forever with the pieces of yourself that got left behind. Patricia is 68 now, still watching her daughter with a mixture of love and fear, still wondering if one day she'll wake up and find Samantha gone again, back to the mountain, back to the darkness that calls to her in voices only she can hear. Jessica is a therapist now, specializing in trauma recovery. She never married either. Says she can't stop thinking about her best friend who came back from the dead but never really came home. She still sends Christmas cards to Samantha every year. Samantha sometimes sends them back. The other kids from that hike, Derek, Amanda, Tyler, they scattered to different parts of the country. Bilt lives far away from the mountains that haunt them. They don't talk about what happened. Don't talk about Samantha. For them, that day in December 1996 is a door they've firmly closed and locked. But Samantha can't close that door, can't lock it, because she left it open when she ran from the cave. And part of her is still standing at the threshold, looking back into the darkness, wondering if she made the right choice by leaving. Dr. Chen retired a few years ago. She gave Patricia all her recordings and notes on Samantha's case, said that maybe someday, someone would be able to make sense of it all. Patricia keeps them in a box in her attic, hasn't looked at them in years. Some things are better left unexamined. The cave on Eagle's Peak is still there, still not on any official maps. People occasionally stumble across it while hiking. Most don't think anything of it, just another small cave in the mountains. But every so often, someone will come down from that area reporting strange things, feeling like they were being watched, hearing breathing in the darkness, finding scratches on the cave walls that weren't there the last time someone checked. And every time Patricia hears about these reports, because news travels in small hiking communities, her heart stops for just a moment. She thinks about calling Samantha, checking on her, making sure she's still in her apartment and not halfway up the mountain, answering a call that only she can hear. Usually, she doesn't call. Because what would she say? What could she say that hasn't been said 1,000 times already? Stay away from the mountain. The darkness isn't calling you home. You're safe here. All lies. Because Patricia knows now, has known for years, even though she doesn't want to admit it, that Samantha isn't safe anywhere. The mountain didn't just take 2 years of her daughter's life. It took her future, her ability to ever truly exist in the normal world. Samantha is caught between 2 realities. The one where she's a survivor, a miracle, a girl who came back from the impossible. And the one where she's still in that cave, still in the darkness, still being slowly absorbed by something that loved her too much to let her die, but not enough to let her truly live. So what are we supposed to take away from Samantha Kline's story? What lessons can we extract from this nightmare of survival and loss, and the spaces between? Let me tell you, because this is important. Because maybe, just maybe, understanding what happened to Samantha can help protect someone you love from suffering the same fate. Lesson 1. Never underestimate the wilderness. That seems obvious, right? But think about it. Really think about it. Samantha and her friends were experienced hikers. They'd done this trail before. They'd checked the weather. They'd prepared. They did everything right. And it still went catastrophically wrong in a matter of hours. The wilderness doesn't care about your preparation, doesn't care about your experience or your good intentions. It's not malicious, it's indifferent, which is somehow worse. Weather can change in minutes. Trails can become impassable. What seemed like a fun afternoon adventure can transform into a life or death situation before you even realize what's happening. So here's what you do. When you go into the wilderness, any wilderness, doesn't matter if it's mountains or forests or desert, you treat it with respect. You tell people exactly where you're going and when you'll be back. You carry emergency supplies even for short hikes. A whistle, a space blanket, extra food and water, a charged phone and a backup battery. You stay together, no matter what. You hold hands if you have to, like children crossing a street. Because in whiteout conditions, in heavy fog, in any situation where visibility is compromised, you can lose someone in seconds. Jessica let go of Samantha's hand because they thought they knew where they were going. That single decision changed both their lives forever. And you listen to your instincts. If something feels wrong, if the weather is changing, if you're starting to feel unsafe, if that voice in your head is saying turn back, you turn back. Pride isn't worth your life. Finishing the hike isn't worth your life. Samantha would still be the girl in that summit photo if they'd turned back when the first snowflakes started falling. Lesson 2. The survival instinct will change you. This is the one people don't talk about enough. We love survival stories. We celebrate the human spirit's ability to endure impossible circumstances. We write books and make movies about people who overcome incredible odds. But we don't talk about the cost. Samantha survived. That's the miracle everyone focuses on. But look at what survival took from her. Her memories, her personality, her ability to connect with other humans, her sense of self. When you're in a survival situation, your brain does whatever it needs to do to keep you alive. It shuts down non-essential functions. It creates coping mechanisms. It builds walls around trauma to protect you from being completely destroyed by it. And sometimes those walls never come down. Sometimes those coping mechanisms become permanent. Sometimes the person who emerges from the survival experience is so fundamentally different from who they were before that they can't find their way back. If someone you love goes through a traumatic survival experience and comes back different, quieter, more distant, unable to slip back into their old life, understand that they're not being difficult. They're not choosing to be different. Survival changed their brain chemistry, changed their neural pathways, changed how they process the world. Be patient with them. Don't expect them to just get over it because they're physically safe now. Trauma doesn't work that way. The body might be safe, but the mind is still fighting for survival, still stuck in that moment of maximum threat. Get them help. Real professional help from therapists who specialize in trauma and PTSD. Don't try to fix them yourself. Don't tell them to stay positive or focus on the good things. They need specialized treatment from people who understand how survival rewires the human brain. And accept that they might never be the same person they were before. Grieve that loss if you need to, but love the person they've become, even if that person is harder to understand. Lesson 3. Isolation is more dangerous than you think. Humans are social creatures. We're not built for extended isolation. Our brains literally need social interaction to function properly. Studies have shown that prolonged isolation causes actual physical changes in brain structure. It can lead to hallucinations, delusions, loss of cognitive function, and permanent psychological damage. Samantha spent 2 years in nearly complete isolation. Whether her experience with the entity was real or a dissociative fantasy her brain created to cope with loneliness, the result was the same. Her mind fragmented. She lost her sense of self. She forgot who she was. If you know someone who's isolated, whether by circumstance or choice, check on them regularly. Don't assume they're fine just because they're not asking for help. Isolated people often don't realize how much they're deteriorating until it's too late. And if you ever find yourself in an isolation situation, lost in the wilderness, trapped somewhere, cut off from other people, talk to yourself out loud. Tell yourself stories. Sing songs. Keep your mind active and engaged. Create routines and stick to them. Anything to maintain your sense of self and prevent your brain from creating alternative realities to cope with the loneliness. Isolation is a silent killer. It destroys you from the inside out. And the worst part is, sometimes people who've been isolated for too long don't want to be rescued. They've adapted to their isolation. The outside world becomes the scary place, and the isolation becomes safety. Don't let it get to that point. Stay connected. And if someone you love is pulling away, becoming more isolated, retreating from the world, intervene. Even if they resist, even if they insist they're fine, they're not fine. Nobody's fine alone for too long. Lesson 4. Sometimes survival is about knowing when to leave. This is the hardest lesson, the one that Samantha's story really drives home. She survived in that cave for 2 years. Whatever kept her alive, whether it was luck, resourcefulness, or something else entirely, she was surviving. She had found a way to exist in impossible circumstances. But she recognized that survival isn't the same as living. That you can be breathing, can have your heart beating, can be technically alive, and still be dying in all the ways that matter. The cave was killing her slowly, taking her piece by piece, and she made the impossibly brave decision to leave, to risk dying in the snow rather than continue existing in that dark place that was absorbing her. Sometimes the situation you're in, whether it's a relationship, a job, a living situation, a friendship, is keeping you alive but killing you at the same time. You're surviving, but you're not thriving. You're existing, but you're not living. And you have to be brave enough to leave. Even if leaving is terrifying. Even if you don't know what's on the other side. Even if the familiar darkness feels safer than the unknown light. Samantha clawed her way out of that cave, even though every part of her that had adapted to survival there was screaming at her to stay. She didn't know if she'd make it. She just knew she couldn't stay. That's courage. Real, bone-deep courage that has nothing to do with fearlessness and everything to do with choosing life over mere survival. If you're in a situation that's slowly eroding who you are, leave. Get help and leave. Find support and leave. Make a plan and leave. But leave before you lose so much of yourself that you can't remember why leaving mattered in the first place. Lesson 5. Some experiences can't be fully understood by people who haven't lived them. And finally, this is important. Understand that there are some experiences in life that are so extreme, so far outside normal human experience, that they can't be adequately explained to people who haven't lived them. Samantha tried to tell people what happened to her. She described the cave, the entity, the darkness. And people listened and nodded, and then explained it away with psychology and trauma responses and coping mechanisms. Maybe they were right. Maybe her experience can be explained by science and psychiatry. But maybe, and Samantha believes this with every fiber of her being, maybe there are things in this world that science can't explain. Experiences that fall outside our understanding of what's possible. Whether you believe her or not doesn't actually matter. What matters is that she lived through something that changed her forever. And whether that something was real or imagined makes no difference to the impact it had on her life. So when someone tells you about trauma they've experienced, about things that happened to them, that sound impossible, or unlikely or strange, listen. Really listen. Don't immediately try to rationalize it or explain it away or fit it into your understanding of how the world works. Their experience is their truth. And that truth shaped them, changed them, made them who they are today. You don't have to understand it to respect it. You don't have to believe in the literal details to acknowledge the genuine impact it had on them. Samantha needed people to believe her more than she needed people to understand her. She needed someone to say, "I don't know what you experienced up there, but I believe it was real for you, and I'm here to help you carry that burden." Instead, most people tried to fix her experience, tried to make it make sense, tried to explain away the inexplicable, and in doing so, they made her feel even more alone. Because if the worst experience of your life is constantly being dismissed as delusion or trauma-induced fantasy, then where does that leave you? How do you heal from something people insist isn't real? Believe survivors, even when their stories are uncomfortable, even when the details don't quite add up, even when your rational mind wants to explain it all away. Something happened to them, and that something matters. So here we are, at the end of Samantha's story. Except it's not really the end, is it? Because Samantha is still living with this every day, still feeling the pull of the mountain, still hearing whispers in the darkness, still wondering if she made the right choice by leaving, or if she should have stayed in that cave where things made a terrible kind of sense. And Patricia is still watching, still worrying, still lying awake at night, wondering if tomorrow will be the day her daughter finally stops resisting the call and goes back. And Jessica still feels guilty, still replays that moment when she let go of Samantha's hand, still wonders how different everything would be if she just held on tighter. And the mountain is still there, still waiting. That cave that might or might not exist on any official map, with its scratches on the walls and its warm darkness and whatever lives or lived inside it. The story doesn't have a neat ending, because real trauma never does. It doesn't resolve, doesn't wrap up, doesn't transform into inspiration or motivation or a feel-good tale about overcoming the odds. Sometimes survival is just survival, messy and painful and ongoing. But here's what I want you to take away from this. Here's why Samantha's story matters. Because somewhere right now, someone is making the decision to go on a hike. Someone is telling their friend, "I'll catch up, I think I see the trail over there." Someone is ignoring their instincts, telling them to turn back because they don't want to seem scared or overly cautious. And maybe if they've heard Samantha's story, they'll make a different choice. Maybe they'll hold their friend's hand a little tighter. Maybe they'll turn back when the weather changes. Maybe they'll respect the wilderness enough to know that it doesn't care about their plans. And somewhere else, someone is struggling with trauma they can't quite explain. Someone is feeling broken and different and like they don't belong in the world anymore. Someone is being told that what they experienced wasn't real or wasn't that bad or should be something they can just get over. And maybe, if they've heard Samantha's story, they'll feel less alone. They'll understand that trauma changes you, and that's not your fault. That survival costs more than most people realize. That it's okay to be different after experiencing something impossible. That's why we tell these stories. Not to entertain, though they do that. Not to shock, though they do that too. But to connect. To remind each other that we're not alone in our struggles. That others have faced the darkness and survived. That survival is possible even when it seems impossible. Samantha Kline walked into the mountains on December 15, 1996, and didn't come home for 2 years. When she finally did come home, she was changed in ways that can't be undone. She lost herself in the darkness and found someone else, someone she's still learning to be. Is that a happy ending? No, not really. Is it a sad ending? Maybe. Depends on how you define success. But it's a true ending. It's the real, messy, complicated reality of what trauma and survival and impossible experiences do to people. And sometimes truth is more important than comfort. If you made it this far, thank you for listening to Samantha's story. Thank you for bearing witness to her experience and her pain and her ongoing struggle. Here's what I want you to do now. First, think about the people in your life who might be planning outdoor adventures. Share this story with them, not to scare them, but to remind them to be careful, to stay together, to respect the wilderness, to come home safe. Second, think about the people in your life who've been through trauma, who've survived something that changed them, who aren't the same people they used to be. Reach out to them. Let them know you're there, that you see them, that you accept them as they are now, not just who they used to be. Third, if you've experienced trauma yourself, if you've survived something impossible and it changed, you know that you're not alone. Know that it's okay to be different. Know that healing doesn't mean going back to who you were before. Sometimes healing means accepting who you've become and learning to live as that person. And finally, and this is important, if you found value in this story, if it moved you or taught you something or made you think differently about survival and trauma, let me know in the comments. Share this video. Help spread awareness about the real cost of survival experiences. Because the more we talk about these things, the less alone people like Samantha feel. The more we understand about trauma, the better we can support survivors. The more we respect the wilderness, the fewer people we lose to it. Samantha's story isn't over. She's still living it every day, still fighting the pull of the darkness, still trying to find meaning in a world that doesn't quite fit anymore. But by sharing her story, by understanding what she went through, by learning from her experience, we can honor her survival. We can make sure her pain wasn't meaningless. We can help prevent others from ending up in the same dark place. So, share this video. Comment your thoughts. Subscribe so you don't miss future stories. Because these stories matter. These experiences matter. These people matter. And somewhere in Boulder, Colorado, a 41-year-old woman is standing at her window, looking at the mountains, feeling the pull of something she can't quite explain, but can never forget. She's surviving. Every day, she's choosing to survive. And that right there is the real miracle of Samantha Kline's story. Not that she survived the impossible, but that she keeps choosing to survive it every single day. Even when the darkness calls her home, even when survival feels harder than surrender, even when she can't remember why she left in the first place. She stays, she endures, she survives. And maybe that's the lesson we all need to learn. That survival isn't about never being broken. It's about choosing to continue existing even after you've been shattered into pieces. It's about finding ways to function even when you don't feel whole. It's about getting up every morning even when the darkness whispers that it would be easier to give up. Samantha Kline is still here, still fighting, still surviving. And as long as she keeps fighting, there's hope. For her, for all of us, for everyone who's ever been lost in their own darkness and wondered if they'd ever find their way back. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. Thank you for being part of keeping Samantha's story alive. And please, please be careful out there, in the wilderness, in life, In the dark places, we all sometimes find ourselves. Stay together. Hold hands. Turn back when your instincts scream at you to turn back. Come home safe. Because there are people waiting for you. People who need you. People who would search for you for 2 years and never give up hope. Come home safe. That's all any of us can do in the end. Just try to come home safe.